So I think the numbers have started to level out. So I'll get started. So morning, everyone. My name's Charles. I'm a Senior Group Relationship Manager at the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce. And welcome to this webinar this morning in partnership with Chamber patron Curium Solutions. First and foremost, I hope everybody's safe and well. I think this the webinar is aptly titled "Can You See the Light at the End of the Tunnel?" And certainly this weekend we had, or certainly here with me, we had some brighter, warmer weather, which was nice. It meant we could kind of get out, get walking, and certainly it helped things. So as I say, I hope everybody's safe and well. I will shortly introduce the panel from Curium that are here with me today. But first of all, just a short note to say on behalf of the Chamber, keep in touch with us, keep up to date with our communications, there's tons of resources online that you can utilize, lots of updated guidance, COVID support resources online as well, constantly and consistently, regularly being updated as and when things change. Again, probably another point here that it's an apt time for this webinar. We're waiting on the latest announcement from the Prime Minister today in terms of beyond the lockdown and what that might look like and what Christmas might look like. So we certainly, I'm sure we're all on the edge of our seats waiting for the update there, and certainly the Chamber will be here to provide guidance and support around that as well. Depending on kind of what the latest news is and what further announcements and programs and support there are for the local business community. So we'll certainly keep you updated on that front as well. But in terms of today, turning to today's webinar, as I say, I'm joined by a panel of speakers from Curium. I'm joined by Mark, Stephen, Lisa, and Kate. And shortly, I will hand over to them to take us through this webinar, which is all about kind of empowering your teams, supporting your teams remotely, because of course we're all in that position where we're all working remotely. The workplace has certainly changed significantly as a result of the impact of the coronavirus. So Curium themselves, they've been a patron for quite a while with the Chamber. They're here to help businesses adapt and change through difficult and challenging times. And they also help ensure employees and the people within a business are engaged and equipped to handle the challenges that are out in front of them. They certainly help businesses to adapt. I can remember not so long ago being on a webinar myself with a speaker from Curium. It was all about the kind of boost button. So I can remember my boost button is certainly there and able to be selected when I need it for that extra push, and certainly throughout this second lockdown I've needed that, so that's been a worthwhile tip. I'm sure many of you are scratching your heads thinking quite what I'm on about now, but I'm sure the Curium team will be able to empower you and enlighten you a little bit more. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over, I think it's Lisa that's kicking things off. So Lisa, over to you.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you. And yeah, apologies for the delay, technical issues in our new way of working, but great introduction there. Thanks, Charles. Yeah, and we'll maybe talk about the boost button later, but thank you. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Really pleased to be part of this webinar. And as Charles said, we're at a point of the time when we're over halfway now through yet another lockdown in the UK. And actually probably normal pre-pandemic life is starting to feel like a distant memory. I know it is for me. And this COVID experience has dominated our lives and news headlines for this year. It's disrupted all, the organisations, large and small, that we have been part of, including ourselves. And it has really put our resilience plans to the test, both on a personal and a business level. But at the end of the first lockdown, we heard lots of good news stories about people starting to reflect. But before we knew it, we were back into a second lockdown, really without the time and space to really move forward and put some of our lessons learned into place on these whole new challenges. And again, we've got some more challenges coming our way. But it goes without saying, this isn't without good news, but many of you, we know, and many of the organisations have achieved so much more than we ever thought we could, which is really, really good news. And I think we've come out much stronger as a result. Many, many people are saying that, which is a great news story. But we are having lots of conversations at the moment, lots of coaching conversations, lots of client conversations. And it's telling us that there is one population in particular that is really feeling the brunt of this experience. And this seems to be our managers and our team leaders at the level, you know, shouldering quite a lot of this experience from an upward and managing downward level. So they're challenged with managing remotely, you know, and they're trying to work with blurred lines between home and work, keeping their people motivated and performing, you know, whilst balancing all those conflicting pressures of our people, our business, and of course our customers. So we were hearing this a lot. So we sat down and got together as a team and said, you know, what can we do? What lessons can we bring? You know, what research can we do to help lighten the load for this really key crucial leadership population? So that's what today we're going to focus on in particular. So we know our roles as leaders is a juggling act at the best of times, without a doubt. But these circumstances require much, you know, new level of adaptation. You've really got to be flexible. So there's lots of things as a leader you could do. We know that. But a good start is to think about, where do I need to focus my efforts to get the most impact? So we'd like to look at it in 3 areas. So me, we, and you. So as a leader, these are the 3 focus areas that could have the most impact, we believe. So me is all about self-leadership, knowing what's at your personal core and taking care of that. The we is all about the team. So how do you, champion team collaboration and take care of your team? And the final bit is the you. So inclusive leadership. This means appreciating, understanding the needs of every individual within your team and making sure that we're keeping them engaged and giving the best of that. So that's going to be our focus for today. And why? Why is that? So in terms of taking care of yourself, encouraging your group of leaders to focus on themselves has never been so important. And if they're neglecting their self-care, their self-leadership, then this will result in burnout. And we're hearing a lot of this in conversations that we're having at the moment. So we're going to have a little look at this. Kate is going to have a look at that for us. And then taking care of the team. So focusing on the team. So the challenge of feeling and working as a team isn't easy during these circumstances. We totally know that. And leaders, to get the best from this, will need to see this as an opportunity to reset our team's priorities, our ways of working, our focus. And then the big thing is being able to galvanize them to work towards this. And if we're not able to do this, if we neglect this, then this will result in silo mentality as teams who have been able to adapt to move forward, and others stay behind or stay still. So we're going to have a look at this through Stephen and Mark's session. And then finally, taking care of your individuals. So it's great that we have the team and the me, but we also need to appreciate that there's individuals in the team and understanding really where they're at, what's going on for them, work and home, and making sure that we are looking at those needs. Because if we neglect them, then that's going to result in a lack of engagement. And we're already hearing that people who actually were our high performers pre-lockdown are starting to show signs of lack of engagement. So how do we tackle some of that? So in today's webinar, we're going to explore this through 3 different areas. So Kate Bailey, our principal consultant, is going to look at the emotional and psychological challenge faced by managers. And she's going to tap into some research from an academic point of view and provide some useful insight. Then Stephen and Mark are going to look at the management challenge, and they're going to look at how do we balance people and tasks in these remote situations and draw some insights to help us with some practical ways to look at this. And then finally, the leadership challenge. We're going to take some key takeaways from our leadership program and the stuff that we've been developing just for these scenarios in terms of helping managers align and engage and motivate their teams. So some quick activities that you can take away with you today. So without further ado, I am going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to hand over to Kate, who's going to look at the first part of this session. Thanks, Kate.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, just hang on a second while I share my screen. So as Lisa said, I'm going to take you through the sort of emotional, physical and psychological challenge that we're facing at the moment. So as Lisa said, it's really important that we take some self-care and understand and care for what's going on for us right now. So we're in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic, but we also seem to be in the middle of a Zoom sort of fatigue pandemic as well. So I don't know about you, but when we had the first instruction to stay home in March, I was thinking, okay, I can handle this. So my job in the past has been a mix of home working and then working on client side. But if I'm honest, the reality has been very different. I was suddenly faced with back-to-back online meetings, struggling with broadband connections and technology, finding myself glued to my desk. It's also finding it much more complex to manage without those quick face-to-face interactions that I took for granted. And I find myself at the end of the day and at the end of the week quite exhausted. And I know from the conversations that we've had with our clients, this is a common feeling among our clients, and I imagine for all of us. So what's been going on? Well, it's probably a little bit more than just Zoom exhaustion. It's sort of pandemic exhaustion. So we are in an unprecedented situation where there's been lots and lots of stress factors that are impacting on our well-being. And if you just take work, what we find is we have constant Zoom meetings, we've got much more complex environment that we're having to deal with, there's a lack of physical interaction, there's a blending of home and work life. And in particular, we're hearing from people, team leaders and managers, that they are struggling the most here because they're struggling in terms of making sure that they don't pass on any stress down to their team, but also struggling to manage upwards as well. But we have to recognise that this is in an external situation where there's much more stress going on as well. So there's much more anxiety. We're all feeling more anxious about the future, much more uncertainty. We're back into lockdown number 2. So we're much more isolated. We have got lack of those social connections that we're more used to. There's the boredom, we're cooped up. So we have to recognise that this is quite an extreme situation in a way. And this is akin to polar explorers, actually, who go off to explore the Arctic or the Antarctic and are isolated for months and months on end. But the difference here is that they had months and months of training before that and they chose to go, whereas we didn't. So to help us understand what's actually happening for us physiologically and psychologically, let's go back to basics. What's actually going on in our body? Can I just ask whether you, so I'm just going to hide, sorry. So first of all, it's important to remember that our body and mind aren't separate. They are connected, they act as a system. What affects our mind affects our body, and what affects our body affects our mind. And the main system that connects this is our nervous system. So our nervous system runs from our brain all the way down our body, connecting our organs and our lungs, our breathing systems to our brain. And part of this nervous system is the autonomic nervous system, which is completely unconscious. And this actually controls and regulates our breathing and our organ function and helps us to manage stress and keep us safe from threats. Now, there are 2 parts to this nervous system. There's a sympathetic nervous part of it, which is the increases the heart rate. This is when you take a breath in. And the parasympathetic is the other part of the system, which decreases the heart rate, which is signals when you breathe out. Now, we should all recognise what happens when our sympathetic kicks in. So let's imagine that we're in Tesco or Sainsbury's and we've just done a really big shop. We're at the till and a massive queue behind us and we need to pay. So we look around and try to find our either purse or wallet and it's not there. So that heart-dropping, stomach-dropping moment is your sympathetic system being activated in response to the threat. And it's like a brain's fire alarm has gone off and you may experience faster heart rates, some sweating, and you may not be able to think straight. So that's your sympathetic system kicking in. Until the moment when you suddenly realise that, I left my purse in the car. So that sense of relief is your parasympathetic kicking in, taking your heart rate back down. So that's the same reaction when you're about to present to a large group of people, by the way. So at heart, we're still animals, and we operate in a state of alert all the time, unconsciously scanning the horizon for threats. This is an evolutionary thing. We evolved this system when we had the threat of saber-toothed tigers, and it's still here with us today. So our nervous system is constantly scanning the horizon for these threats, and it sends signals to our brain. And our brain has this fire alarm system that triggers a response in our body. And this response has 3 different levels. The first level being social engagement, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Second one being fight or flight, which we're probably all more familiar with. And then the third level is freeze or flop. So what the body first, when the nervous system first detects a threat, it tries to enable a social engagement system. So first of all, we're social animals, and we're built to seek out human interaction. In fact, we actually have something in our brain called mirror neurons. And these are neurons that are specifically designed to pick up on other people's movements. And we do this subconsciously. It's like a sort of neural Wi-Fi, constantly picking up on other people's emotional states. And we can see this effect quite easily. When somebody yawns, then we tend to yawn as well. So also when somebody smiles at us, we smile too. And that's like an automatic way of relaxing us. So we're constantly looking for those signals from people. And if we do receive those mirrored signals when somebody's relaxed and they smile at us, it will actually slow our heart rate down and help us relax. Our parasympathetic system kicks in. But in a conversation where we're not picking up those signals and we can see that somebody's more stressed or we're not getting the smile back, our body does perceive that as a threat. And there is a lot of research that says that with online interaction that we're doing all the time now, our body, our subconscious has to work a lot harder to pick up those signals. And so therefore online meetings could actually, our body could perceive them as much more threatening because we're having to do a lot more work to create that sort of mirroring effect, which is why it's really important when we're doing in the virtual world that we pay more attention to this social engagement system. So when you're next having a meeting with somebody with your team, then make sure you smile. So if the social engagement system hasn't kicked in, then the system will then tend to go to fight or flight. Now, we're fairly familiar with this. What this is actually doing physiologically is that this kicks in the sympathetic part of our nervous system. And the body also releases the stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. And if you think back to evolutionary terms, this is actually the body getting us ready to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. But this can actually be triggered even when we're having a meeting with a senior manager or so on. If our body then feels that we can't cope with that particular threat, that it's constantly under that attack, it can trip into the third level of response, which is freeze or flop. This is where we actually start to shut down, in effect. And this is where we feel that sense of overwhelm. Our rational brain can actually shut down and we feel we can't deal with what's actually going on. So because we're animals at heart, our body is constantly going through this sense of charging for action. So our sympathetic kicking in, and then we're releasing back down to rest as our parasympathetic system kicks in. And when we talk about resilience, it's actually having these two systems in balance so that we are able to move through that charge phase, back into rest phase, and then back into charge phase to meet the next challenge. And that's what we mean by resilience when we talk about it physiologically. But this can go wrong. And while having a challenge is healthy, if we find that we're spending too much time in a sort of hyper-reactive stage, where we're constantly feeling that we're under threat and we're operating in the sympathetic phase more, in the fight or flight phase, we can get stuck there. And that's not great for our health. And if we continue to be in that particular phase, there's a risk we find ourselves in burnout. And burnout really is just then getting stuck in freeze or flop, where it means that we're feeling exhausted, unable to cope and too overwhelmed with the situation. I think we have to recognise that we're in a current situation that's unprecedented, where there's lots and lots of stresses going on, particularly in the way that we're working. So there are more stresses, which means that our nervous systems are probably slightly overactive right now. So it's really important that we recognise this as in ourselves, and recognise where we are on this curve for ourselves, but also where are our team, because then that will allow us to help them if we're feeling they're also acting too much in fight or flight. So we need to remember that this is an automatic unconscious response to the situation where we are dealing with these heightened level of stress. But by recognising that, we know that there's a physiological response that's going on in our bodies, as well as a challenge to our mental well-being, will mean that we're able to recognise those signs better in ourselves and in others, so that we can help ourselves to manage the situation better, but also others. So it is about being kind to yourself and others, but it's also some practical things that we can do to help us regulate our nervous system. So actually actively find ways to calm our nervous system back down to get the parasympathetic cycle to kick in. But it's also to help us manage our internal emotions as well. So recognize where we are in our emotional state. And this will actually help us to build our own personal resilience, but it also helps us to help other people build resilience as well. So I'm just going to talk about some practical things that we can do. And I think Lisa should be posting some resources into chat as I speak as well to help. So you can perhaps look at these in a little bit more detail after this webinar. So the first thing is breathing. So it sounds very simple, but breathing is directly connected to our nervous system. It's actually what controls our nervous system. By making your out breath longer, you can actually activate your parasympathetic system, and that will calm you. So you can try this now. So if you take a breath in for a count of 3, and then out to a count of 4, you actually activate your parasympathetic system. So just by practicing that, just for a minute, will help you regulate your nervous system. The second thing very practically is to press pause more. Just recognise the situations that we're in and recognise that online meetings will take a lot more out of us because we're having to do that a lot more work subconsciously. So diarise transitions between meetings to give you and your nervous system a break, but also give permission to your team to press pause too. And just be careful about how many online meetings you're actually scheduling for them within the week. Exercise. So we know exercise is good for us, and there's lots of research on that. It creates those feel-good endorphins. But recognise that, again, your mind and your body are intimately connected. And as soon as you start to activate your body through exercise, it will calm your nervous system. So even just going outside 5 minutes, 10 minutes during the day for a quick walk will lift your mood, re-energise you, and calm your nervous system. And this is why things like practicing meditation, yoga, mindfulness is also really useful here, because they also allow you to connect your brain with your body. And this actually helps to calm the stress response. So to help regulate our internal emotions, there's lots and lots of research to say how journaling can be very useful. Just by writing down on a daily basis, just jotting down how you're feeling, actually helps you process what's going on for you. And it actually just a safe way to express worries and start to work out what you can do about them. Secondly, stay connected. So, as through this presentation demonstrated that we are social animals, we do need to connect. So obviously make sure that you're connecting to your social network, but with your team, make sure that you're properly connecting with your team. So not just having the meetings just to focus on task, but actually to properly connect emotionally as well. And Lisa's actually going to take you through a technique around balanced conversations that you can use to help you create that better connection. Research into coping with extreme environments, so for example, the polar explorers has identified that when you're in that isolated situations that we are now, that you are going to have to accept that your mood will be low at times, and sometimes your motivation will be low on some days. There's lots of research that says if you start to put in place small achievable goals on a day-to-day basis, and then celebrate the success when you meet those goals. It will actually help you and your team to build more motivation. And finally, what can be very useful is self-talk. So that's being your own coach. So having that internal dialogue with yourself and asking yourself what's going on for me right now, but also giving yourself a positive message can actually help you build some confidence and increase motivation. And again, Lisa's going to take you through a little exercise in her section around how you can do that self-coaching. So hopefully that's a sort of whistle-stop tour of what's going on for us physiologically and psychologically, and hopefully there's a few tips there to help you. And as I said, Lisa should have been posting some resources for you as I speak. I'm now going to hand over to Stephen and Mark, who are going to take you through some of the leadership challenges and how you can look to meet them.
Bear with me 1 second while I just get my slides. So hopefully you guys can now see that. Thank you, Kate. That was really interesting insights on the psychology of how this seemingly never-ending lockdown period is affecting us all. So hello everyone. My name's Stephen Lee. I'm one of the principal consultants here at Curium, and I lead on our operating model proposition.
Hi, and I'm Mark Turner. I'm also a principal consultant at Curium, and I head up our transforming operations activity.
So in this section, we're going to ask questions about the we, particularly in the context of relationships between a people manager and his or her team in the world of remote working. But in doing so, we also touch a little on the inclusive leadership part of the you. So we're going to do this a bit like a talking heads, hence the picture of the two Muppets there for anybody that's old enough to remember them. Now, we can't be sure how many organisations have fully accounted for the impacts on their individual team members as lockdown has progressed. But in this discussion, Mark and I want to explore some of those organisational impacts, those that will still be affecting organisations of any size. And we're going to try and share some thoughts which we hope will be useful to you. It's worth remembering that this whole lockdown and the remote working world commenced back on March the 23rd. So that's 8 months ago. And as you can see from some of these numbers, it has had an impact on a huge number of people. So Mark, you've been talking to a range of leaders from different industries across the UK during lockdown. What would you say are the themes that you're hearing about?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I have been fortunate. I've kept in touch with a range of contacts, either clients of ours or just friends of mine who work in senior positions in leadership across different industries. And it's fascinating how things have changed. I think for most people, when we were plunged into this original lockdown, it was rapid, dramatic, and everyone was focused on doing the right things to protect the NHS, look after ourselves and obviously our loved ones too. I often think it seems odd looking back now, but there was almost a sense of excitement about it because it was just so different for all of us. But every leader that I've spoken to across different industries, different sizes, private and public sector, were all really impressed with how their IT teams developed an impressively agile approach. And in a matter of days, hurdles over technology that were always existed apparently were overcome, and millions of people were allowed to work at home.
Yeah, that's certainly reflective of the conversations I've been having too. So for those listening, my background includes leading large IT and large change functions. And I've kept in touch with a number of the companies I've worked with, and they've said the same thing. It's been really impressive how quickly some of those really large organizations have blown away the corporate treacle almost overnight, acting in emergency mode, if you like. And to be brutally honest, if they hadn't done that, they'd have struggled to have stayed in business.
Yeah, very true. And I think, as the slide says there, the growth in home working went from like 1.5 million to just under 24 million in like a matter of days or weeks, really. But it wasn't just the fact people could work from home. Some people I talked to, they admitted there was like a legacy fear in their organization around, could they trust people to work at home? Would they get any work done? Would they actually turn up for work? And it's interesting how those fears evaporated quite quickly once we all were plunged into this kind of home working lockdown environment. And I also heard lots of really positive feedback around how, from an individual perspective, their well-being was just being looked after more now. They could be more flexible about when they work, so they could meet the demands of their families too, who are also locked down at home as well.
So do you think that lockdown and working from home has accelerated better ways of working?
I don't think so. I think the speed and success of the changes that everyone achieved was really impressive. Everybody reacted positively at pace because we were all in this together. There was almost like a Dunkirk spirit thing going on. But I don't think anybody would have imagined that, 8 months on, we're still doing the same thing. And I think, linking back to what Kate was saying, I think there's a watch out for a lot of us here around the psychological impacts for line managers and organizations, and to consider more thoroughly about what's really changed and what things may have slipped through the net. I don't know. I think many people are probably finding this second period of lockdown even tougher.
Yeah, definitely. I've read reports predicting a tsunami of mental health issues relating to feelings of isolation, anxiety, disconnectedness, some of the stuff that that Kate was talking about. But if that's recognised early, if it's actively managed, then I think we can remain positive. And if we assume that in the spring, at worst, maybe the summer, we'll be starting to get back to some form of new normality, at least in relation to COVID, it's already clear to me that things have shifted for good. People are starting to take and build on the positives of those new ways of working. And to quote Winston Churchill, never let a good crisis go to waste. So I've been doing a lot of reading on this in order to write a couple of articles that were posted on LinkedIn recently. One of those was around the future of the office, and one was on remote workers, but from the workers' perspective. So I'd quite like to quote a couple of examples from that. The first one was a recent Harvard Business Review paper, which explored new patterns of working. And in there, it quoted that some companies have already changed. In fact, the University of Zurich would be one example, where they're quoting that they've invented a 3-2-2 week. I think that's the sort of pattern that's going to become prevalent. The second thing that I would quote was CBRE, who are a global real estate company, released a report in September. They've researched 77 of some of the world's largest companies across multiple sectors, and they quoted 73% are anticipating employee choice about where they work. They also quote that 83% are anticipating a more collaborative shared use of the office space. Now, I can back that up with countless conversations Curium are having as well with our clients and with our wider network. It seems that almost every business is now considering increased remote working, different working patterns, and changes to how they're going to use their office. Some, in fact, are even considering whether they need an office anymore, which means that those ways of working are going to completely and permanently change the dynamic between the manager and the team. So that relationship really does need a full rethink, particularly around how sustainable it is and how healthy people are now those quick fixes are in. So I would encourage everybody to consider it from two perspectives. First, how do you manage the productivity in the workflow, which I know, Mark, is your specialist subject, so you'll talk about that, I'm sure. But individual engagement and well-being is also very important, because there are a number of things, in my view, which are going to threaten people's mental health. The novelty of working from home is wearing thin for some. Shorter days, the clocks have changed, it's getting dark just after 4 o'clock. We're not blessed with that weather that we all enjoyed during the spring and the summer of lockdown 1. So as you've said, it really does feel tougher this time, and just knowing that we're in it for the long haul is not making that any easier.
Yeah, sure. So what the risks, Stephen, are people putting these changes in too quickly?
Okay. Well, my view is that any size of operation or organisation is effectively an ecosystem. So we're in the realms of systems thinking here, where one small change can have an impact across a whole system. And every part of any organisation needs to be in balance. So if one part is changed for any length of time, as is the case now, other parts are going to have to adapt to adjust and create that new balance.
A bit like when the grey squirrel was brought into this country and carried a pox virus, it decimated our own squirrel population.
Yeah, that's right. It's the law of unintended consequences. And there are countless examples in nature. Personally, though, I also quite like to think about sporting analogies. Sometimes they work a little better for people. So, you know, how each member of this Olympic cycling pursuit team needs to work together. If one of those guys starts to drop off the back, you know, the whole team suffers. Or comparisons with a Formula One racing car. There are hundreds of really small things that can make a high performance car faster than the competition. And if any one of those things underperforms or fails, it will reduce overall performance. And if not retuned, that can lead to an imbalance, and if left further, you know, catastrophic damage. Now, people talk about teams and people firing on all cylinders all the time, and that's the real analogy here. How do you keep the team operating efficiently when the rules or the dynamics have changed? You know, in this analogy, are you overworking your engine parts and risking failure? Or in the general context of this conversation, are you overstressing your people, and could that lead to bigger problems at the organizational level?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you know, I spend a lot of time in large call centers or large back office operations, and I guess they're like big engines where everyone's got a vital part to play. But I do think that one of the most important cogs in that engine is a team leader, and I think they've been impacted the most severely by this current climate. Now, you know, you always reference our age, Stephen, but I have genuinely worked with hundreds of team leaders over the years. And I feel I know their life well. They've typically they're the backbone of any operation, and I do think they're the hardest working too, and maybe most unappreciated. They've often risen to their position because they've been really good at that kind of the role beneath them. They've been technically competent and accurate in things, and they're absolutely great at that role that they're now leading and coordinating. This is often their first step into the world of management. And their primary skill is probably they were really good at handling 99% of the kind of technical or task type challenges that their team members encounter. And they would have been really comfortable, I think, interacting with their teams in the office when they're all together. So maybe they're now misfiring because they're not with their team are all at home in a remote location. And I think the role has changed now, because I don't think a team leader can now just get by being that brilliant technical or task expert. I think that role has to be supported to develop more refined skills around supporting their team members' well-being. And they've also become almost the sole link now between all these people like us now sat in our bedrooms and our kitchens at home with the organization. You know, we don't have those kind of water cooler chats, those stairwell chats basically, or even the coffee shop, because everybody's remote. Now, we've been talking to a lot of our clients to ask how their people are feeling. And I think we've got a slide now which kind of shows some of the feedback we've been hearing from our clients. And I'm not going to read all these through, but I do think it's interesting that what people expect of their organizations and their managers now, they want them to care about their life and their well-being, both inside and outside of work. And they want real clarity over their role and expectation and priorities right now. And even more so because everyone's at home and probably feeling a bit lonely, provide them with some regular feedback and communication so they can be in touch with what's going on. And also to let them, I don't know, have a sense of personal achievement, so they know what they're doing is supporting the organization and their other colleagues around. You know, no one would ever have disputed, I don't think, that managing people's well-being was an important thing for any leader, but I can't imagine it, certainly in my life, it's ever been more essential right now that team leaders feel that they've been equipped with the additional skills to succeed in this strange new world.
Yeah, totally agree. People managers and team leaders in particular are pivotal, and they now need to find new ways and new tools to manage tasks. But as you say, perhaps more challenging, they now need to be far better equipped to manage people's emotional states. And without the luxury of seeing them in the office every day so they can pick up the signs when someone's starting to struggle, they don't have that anymore. So organizations that recognize that and adapt to that early, I think, are going to be the ones that survive and thrive. And what we're seeing at Curium, after perhaps an understandable pause, is that we're seeing an increase in public and private sector demand for support here, a marked increase in requests to help define new ways of working, and an even sharper rise in requests for our people solutions team to help them with things like leadership development, team performance, behavioural profiling, and especially coaching skills.
Yeah, it's very true. I know, my team, we spend a lot of time with our clients, helping them to simplify and share team performance outputs so that everyone feels more engaged and is aware of the importance of their personal contribution whilst they're working remotely, because it is hard, that they don't have big whiteboards in their houses now to show how performances are on a call center, the kind of data showing you what calls are queuing. We've been focused really heavily on these real changes at a team manager level, because I said it before, but I do think it's been significant. And I just think being able to have consistent and balanced conversations with team members every day and in every interaction, I think is an essential skill now, rather than being a unique attribute that maybe a few practiced.
Yeah, absolutely essential. I personally would also encourage people to reassess the way they're structured, in particular their ways of working. Going back to that systems thinking discussion, look for what else needs to change in their own ecosystem, find ways of restoring that new balance.
Yeah, and sorry to bang on about this, but I do think it's really important to invest in that team leader relationship. And I know Lisa's going to talk about that in our third section. But before handing over, there's three things I'd like to almost leave you with as thought focus, really. First of all, are your ways of working really beneficial now to your on-site, remote, and hybrid workers? It's worth thinking about how you keep your team engaged and informed about the wider performance outputs and how they're contributing towards this. As an example of this, we did a project last year with a local authority, and in fact that image there is genuinely of that city in the UK. But they had an administration team scattered across about 9 different sites in the UK, all supporting frontline workers like health visitors and social workers. And they were asked if we could create some simple techniques and disciplines to create like a team of teams feel, so they didn't feel like remote people working scattered across a city. And what's fascinating is when we did this, we had no idea clearly about how COVID was going to impact our lives and lockdown. But all those techniques we put in place and disciplines have really added great value to a multi-site operation, because now the entire organisation is multi-site. And as a result of that, kind of the performance and well-being of those people in those teams is carried on flourishing. The operational challenges have started to minimise, and it was a huge success, but almost enhanced by lockdown. I've actually got a video I'll drop into the chat when I finish talking about, where we've interviewed the service manager from that borough council, so you can hear firsthand what it was like before, and how the things we did, which were I think fairly simple, had a huge impact and long-lasting impact on that organisation's ability to flourish and perform. And the second one would be, are your conversations balanced and consistent, irrespective of where your team members are located? Now, again, an example of this for me would be, we've been doing lots of work with a large law firm in the UK, and like many organisations, all their lawyers are now sat at home, and the managers, to be fair, did start focusing very heavily on well-being conversations, but they find it quite difficult to incorporate that with some performance conversations to find out how they were doing and those kind of things with actual workload type stuff. And again, we helped them with some tools and techniques to help kind of realign those conversations so that they became better balanced and again, more engaging for people, so that they weren't just checking on well-being. It was also about the organisation performance too, and that made it all more valuable as well. And finally, are you investing in your team managers to put them in a position of strength? Now, Stephen, you mentioned before that we are seeing a genuine increased demand from our clients for support in areas such as leadership development and team performance and behavioural profiling, as well as coaching skills. And all of these things is to set up leaders for success in the new world. So I'm going to hand over to Lisa now, who's going to talk about this and the leadership challenge. Lisa, I think you're on mute.
think that's the biggest thing that everyone says, isn't it? On mute.
Go to the year.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Well, thank you, Kate, and thank you, Mark and Stephen. Some really great insights in there. And I think actually what the big message that comes out there is there are things that we can do. There is light at the end of this tunnel. So I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour and take a few of our leadership capabilities and go through some activities in the last 10 minutes. We will post a link into the chat as well. So these activities will be available for you to do afterwards if we do them at pace. So grab a pen and paper if you haven't got one already, and let's do these activities to see if you, or you can share with your managers, shift some thinking. Okay, so we said Kate focused on taking care of yourself, so the me, and there is a picture in there of an oxygen mask, because the analogy is when you're high up in the sky in a plane and you need to use the oxygen mask, the advice is put your own on first before helping anyone else, even your child, which can feel like counterintuitive, but actually within only a few moments, 2 minutes, you start to lose that ability to do that. So it's really important that you do that first. And it's the same with leadership. You know, you have to look after yourself first before you can look after your people. So the process of change, personal change, is about really two things: awareness and responsibility. Awareness is about understanding what's going on for you and what are those emotions, so the things that Kate talked about. What are the emotions that are going on for you, and actually understanding that, and then moving to responsibility. So looking at accepting where we are and then choosing to take responsibility for those thoughts and actions, and that helps us in terms of moving forward in terms of our performance. So awareness and responsibility forms the basis of every good coaching conversation, including our own coaching conversations. So as Kate mentioned, one of the key tips that we can do in this space is do a bit of self-coaching. So asking ourselves some really great questions that gets us to think about where are we at now and how can we move that forward. So I want you to grab a pen and paper. And I want you, first of all, to take a couple of breaths. Okay, so as Kate said, take 3 big breaths. Breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth, using the counting system, just to ground you. Okay. So I want you to think about where you are right now. And how are you responding to the situation right now? So write out just a couple of keywords. If you had to name your emotions, how am I feeling? So what are the emotions that are coming out for you? If this isn't the best possible response, what might be a better response or emotion? If you could choose a better one, what would that be? And what difference would it make? Okay, and one of the most important questions, if you could do just one thing right now, the smallest thing, what would that be to make a positive shift? Great. Okay. Well, hopefully that's a really great set of questions. Really great when you're feeling overwhelmed. Dig them out. Do take a few moments just to understand where you currently are. So me is really important. Okay, the second part we looked at was the we, which was around the team collaboration and understanding what we need to do as a team to move us forward. So there are lots of key skills in this place, but communication I'm going to pick out as the top one here right now. So communication is a vital management skill at any time, but it's really important, even more important during a crisis. And I believe we're still in this mode, and even if things have become more familiar. And as we heard in the first presentation. Crisis creates uncertainty, elevated stress, some anxiety, so in your flight or freeze zone. And actually, people are often very tunnel vision, and they're stuck in the moment, the present of doom, and can't see beyond the future. So as leaders, if during this time, in terms of our communication, it's unavailable or inconsistent, and people feeling unsure or disconnected, then they will be rattled. They'll feel rattled. We'll call it rattled. And you may see some unexpected behaviours starting to play out. Then add to this, the fundamental way we naturally communicate at work is taken away. We can't have those face-to-face interactions. We can't check in face-to-face and chatting in the corridor and the coffee machine. So our communication as a leader has to fill a lot of gaps. So to help with this thinking, I'm working with a number of leaders in this space. We try and simplify it into 4 key areas to think about. So you may want to consider your own communication and which areas you might be showing up in and which you might be neglecting at the moment. So the first one is, am I connected? So do I spend time before communicating, really walking in my team's shoes and help them understand what's the impact to them, what might it mean to them, so the messages don't just land blindly. We really have that appreciation. And other things in this space in terms of connecting is providing the opportunity for discussion, questions and ideas. Are we doing that? It's really important to start there. The second is clarity. So do I spend time ensuring that my messaging and those messages I cascade are clear and easy to understand? Probably the population that we're talking about actually carry the most responsibility for cascading messages downwards and also upwards. So we've got a real responsibility here to make sure that they land in the most consistent way. And actually the other part of this, are they open and honest about the facts of the situation? It's really important that we do this at this stage. The third is, am I providing focus and alignment? So do I use my communication opportunities to galvanize my teams to take actions towards a shared goal? So we said we could see this as an opportunity to re-energize our team towards a new inspirational goal, a new way of thinking. So once that's in place, do I use every part of my communication to galvanize them towards that? And the other part is, do I really own the messages? So often there may be difficult messages to cascade or to tell. And do I avoid labeling them as the business, or the senior leaders say? Do I own these as a leader is really important. And then finally, am I providing the energy and motivation? So do I spend the time balancing my messages so that my team hear the positive as well as the more challenging messaging? It's really important, as we said, that people might be in that place of present doom, and how do we help shift them forward? And this is part of that. So you can do this by providing the bigger picture explanations or understanding the context or impetus behind the decisions that have been made. It's a really great place to move some of this forward. So as I said, right, at the start of this, really, if you could consider your own communication, have a think about your last week's communication, do a bit of an audit, and where would you say that you are really strong in, and where might you need to do a bit more work on? So what might you be neglecting in this space? So that's one of the key capabilities in we. And then finally, an activity in you. So we said if we don't connect with the individuals and understand how they are actually feeling right now, and a really good question to ask is, is what they did pre-COVID and even in lockdown 1 still relevant now? Is there more that they could do? Do you know that? What's getting in their way? And really, how do we need to connect to them now more in this remote world, and so that we can get the support in place for this? Leave that one. So I'm not going to go through this exercise right now, but one of the things that we really focus on, one of the capabilities, are balanced conversations. And Kate made reference to this, and so did Mark in their sessions. So I'm going to put into the chat box as part of the pack this as a checklist. So it's really good to think about the conversations that you had. Again, do a bit of audit of the last few conversations you had with your people, and just check through around each of those different areas and see what's happening in there, and is there a real balance between you and the individual in front of you. But to really help shape this, we've got a bit of a checklist. Okay, so Kate, you asked this question in the chat, in the Q&A, actually, around, where do we start in terms of our interactions? And there's, in terms of conversations, we're finding that lots of leaders and managers are starting and calling people up and having meetings really on task, and actually we're not seeing some of that human element and the other parts that need to be, play strongly in this space. So the 4 areas that we need to be thinking about is, the first one is always start here. So your check-in and well-being. And as Mark labelled the things that people are asking for now, I've overlaid this to the balanced conversations checklist. So we start with check-in and well-being, and really asking questions and listen so that they feel heard. And, so the type of questions you might ask in this space is, what have you learned about yourself during this period? And this section is really about helping the person understand who they are. The second is about giving me clarity of my role and priorities now. So really helping them to understand what they're capable of, and then sit with them to plan that through. You're helping them clarify priorities and defining their role in this new plan. So the kind of questions you might be asking in this space is, what actions will you commit to and by when? The third area, this is about helping them see for themselves where they are currently at, really important, and then helping them unlock that potential wherever they are. And sometimes this might be slowing them down and giving them more support, or it might be that you need to accelerate their progress by giving them more stretching and challenging goals. So we need to understand where they are performing, what's their results, and the great question is, what is helping or blocking you achieving? And I'm working through that in the coaching scenario. And then finally, this last section is about weaving their individual role and purpose into the team purpose. So, and then in the next level, so that they see as an individual the vital role they now play in the future. So it redefines that, and so that they're all clear about, the part they play. And the bit that can really help in this is making sure that your communications, you check in on the stuff that really impacts them directly, and use this as an opportunity for two-way feedback. Nobody has to have the answers in this space. So are you asking for feedback on the way that you have these conversations, and taking the opportunity to give them some more feedback about how they've been doing? And a great question for both of you is, what would you change? And this all has to be overlaid to give a sense of achievement and to see the opportunities and to learn and grow, to have some focused goals and targets to work towards, and that real balance between awareness and responsibility. And we'll put all those activities in the chat. I'm sorry we're running over a few moments. We did start late, but we're coming to the end of it now. So in this webinar, we explored the emotional and psychological challenge, and Kate explored that, and hope you got some great tips from that. We explored the management challenge around balancing people and tasks, the we and you, via Stephen and Mark. And I've given you 3 little activities there to help align, engage and motivate teams as we move forward. So the questions I leave to you really is, how are your people feeling really? Do you really know how they're feeling, and have you had that conversation? Now, as things move on, does the dynamic between managers and their teams need a rethink? Do you need a new strategy for this new way of working? And finally, as leaders, are you flexing our style to meet the current needs of those individuals that look to us for direction? A really key part of this. So we're imploring that there is light at the end of this tunnel, and we really hope that you've been able to take some tips to help your people see the light at the end of this tunnel. But if there's more that you want to know, then we'd be really happy to explore that together and see the light together. So we're offering a free 30-minute consultation that you can talk through any of those challenges, and we can explore it together to see if there are some actions that we can take to help everybody move forward. So I'm just going to leave it on a clip from a client. So this is Faye Fishlock, who's a partner head in DACB Beechcroft, who has been working with us on how to move some of these things forward, if it plays.
Here I am in Blackrock, which is the point in Wales between the two Severn bridges. So just in the distance behind me, you can see the old Severn Bridge. Here's the choppy waters of the Severn, which aren't so choppy today. And here's the new Prince of Wales Bridge into Wales. So why have I picked here? Well, choppy waters is definitely how I felt when I joined Motor Injury in May this year. We were in the midst of the COVID-19 lockdown. I had OPEX challenges, BD challenges, a budget worthy of an Everest climb, thanks Shriyash. And Andy and Ella will tell you, all I said, pretty much most of the first meeting, was it's only day 10, but literally our pipeline had stopped. The cars, commercial vehicles were all parked up on garages, forecourts and driveways across the country. It couldn't have been a worse time to start for this project. Thankfully though, we had the Curium workshops and coaching lined up. And I can't say how pleased I was to have that in the background at that time. Curium taught me to keep it simple, break things down to bite-sized chunks, and the Donald Miller and brand story workshop was certainly of great help to the motor injury partners and I as we tried to work out our BD strategy at this particular time, which was just so tough, both for us as a project and DAC Beechcroft generally. The best thing, which will probably make her blush, is Emma's coaching. I can honestly say I wouldn't have got through the last 6 months in one piece without her there as the sounding board and an outside pair of ears and eyes to listen to what was going on and suggest what best to do in many a difficult situation. In fact, whilst all the workshops are absolutely fabulous, it's when you go to put those things into practice and you have that opportunity of the coaching alongside that really makes the difference. And I know I certainly felt that, and I'm pretty sure everyone else that's had that opportunity feels very fortunate too. There's a famous saying that you give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. You teach him to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. This is the famous lave net fisherman here at Blackrock. It's an ancient custom where they go salmon fishing in the Severn, in the choppy waters, to try and catch the fish. I think Curium's taught me how to fish in terms of OPEX, leadership and teamwork. And I can't thank them and DACB enough for that opportunity. And I hope to be here for many years to come, continuing to fish and continuing to put best practice in place.
Thank you. And I'm sorry we've run over. I'll hand over to Charles.
That's great. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, really comprehensive presentation there from everyone involved. Again, I'd like to echo some of the views of the delegates today, that was really insightful, very useful, lots of takeaways, lots to put into perspective because you can kind of really associate with it. I think from myself and through my personal experience, this second lockdown really has been a challenge. I think you touched on some of the reasons for that. And I think there's that uncertainty as well that we've all got as individuals, employees, business owners, managers. So much uncertainty at the moment that can really take over. And I think to have some takeaways is really critical. So I'd like to thank all of the panel today for their contributions. Thanks to Curium Solutions. Thanks to everyone for their time for joining us. And I guess I know we've run over, and I'm keen to make sure everyone kind of carries on and goes about their day. No doubt that there are many more Zooms to come for many of us. But has anybody got any kind of final questions or thoughts? Yeah, please do pop them in the Q&A quickly. We might have time for a quick question or two. I know that Kate had previously posted in there and had a response as well, just on kind of the return of face-to-face meetings and how that might change things. Because again, we've all had to adapt, and as a result of that, we might then take some of those adaptations forward, and they become kind of more permanent changes. And how do you kind of transition, I guess, back to normality when we get there? So that was an interesting question, which I think was answered. I'm just having a quick look in the chat to see if there was any more. Any final thoughts for the panel, just to wrap things up? Any final thoughts on the big takeaways from this? I think you kind of summarised them in that last slide and that video, Lisa. But any last thoughts on quick changes that could be done now that could really help everybody?
I'd say from my point of view, I picked out probably the key capability where it starts for me is communication. So I would implore leaders and team managers to just do an audit, review their last week's communications and see if you're hitting all the boxes, or is there more that we need to do in this space? Because if you're able to crack that, then that really does alleviate some of those fears, and that stress in there. And actually you are, as every leader, whatever you're doing, every email, every call, every video call you do, you are under the spotlight, and people are a little bit more harsh in these remote times. So we have to put a bit more work into that. So for me, that's a key capability in that space.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I know everyone is probably completely zoomed out right now and Teams out, but I wouldn't underestimate the importance of trying to create easy and consistent visibility of your team or your departmental performance outputs. I think these are really valuable and relevant information for everybody in your team. And when they're working at home, so it's a really simple way to help them feel connected with the rest of their team.
I'd jump in with a really simple one, and that's, if you want to do something, schedule it. So schedule those catch-ups, schedule those coffee chats. Otherwise, you'll just find yourself too busy, and then it'll slip away.
Yeah, and I'd also say schedule space as well. So it's really important that we just recognise that when we're on these Zoom calls, it is taking a lot of our unconscious mind's efforts. So it's about being really effective. So when we're having a catch up with somebody, then we make sure we're very focused, and then allow them to have space in the week where we don't have video calls as well, so we can get on and actually do the work.
Great. No, that's fantastic. Thanks all. I think I'm guilty occasionally of putting too much back to back, and then kind of getting to 4 or 5 o'clock and thinking, why am I so exhausted? And not traveling in the car obviously brings with it some benefits, and not having to sit in a car or go through that. But yeah, you tend to then, certainly tend to be more intense, I think, and more productive. I think there's definitely a benefit there, but like you say, schedule those breaks in and look after yourself is the key thing, isn't it, through this. Great. Well, I think, as I say, we're coming to that time, I think, where we'll draw everything to a close. Thanks again to everyone from Curium for their contributions today. As I say, really insightful webinar, and we've had some great feedback already. I guess for everyone, for all the delegates that have tuned in today, if you are interested in that 30-minute consultation, I think there was details posted there in the chat, or if you're stuck, just reach out to us at the chamber and we'll certainly point you in the right direction. But all that's left to say, I think, is have a great day, everyone. Have a great week. We're almost there, hopefully, fingers crossed. Next week, or the end of next week, might look a little bit differently. But take care, stay safe, everybody, and keep in touch.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.